You may have read or heard a few times the terms default, moratorium, or debt restructuring and refinancing involving some countries. But what do these terms mean in practice? Well, they are nothing more than expressions for the famous deadbeat, or I have a debt and don't deny it, but I will pay only when I can. Deadbeat, or better said, defaults by countries, are actually a common and reoccurring phenomenon throughout history. When you look carefully, virtually every country has defaulted at least once in its history. But could you say which is the most deadbeat country in history? Let's find out in this video. But before that, make sure to subscribe to this new channel to see more videos that will cover, analyze, and reveal economic aspects behind countries' successes and failures, and other economic interesting facts around the world. First of all, we need to know exactly what a country's debt or default is. Basically, an event of a country's default is an event in which an obligation or debt has not been paid as agreed. It can occur in various ways, such as when the debt is simply not paid, or when it's not paid in full, in other words, only a partial payment, or even when it's not paid on the due date, or in other words, there is a delay. These situations can occur because the country does not have enough money, or simply because of bad faith. The most common cases that lead a country to have to declare a moratorium are wars, calamities, political instability, and revolutions, or, as the most relevant of all, economic and financial crises. According to a 2008 study by Harvard University economists Kenneth Rogoff and Carmen Reinhart, there were about 250 cases of external defaults and at least 70 cases of internal defaults requested by different countries from the 1800s to the 2000s. So this is much more common than you thought, right? And if we consider the period before 1800, this number gets even higher. However, to carry out this survey, there is a problem. One would think that with at least 320 cases of defaults in history, which is more than one case per year, it would be relatively simple to find a series of data and statistics with all this information, but this is not the case. The truth is that it is not at all easy and simple to have access to historical records of government defaults in any country whatsoever. Is this just a coincidence? Leave your opinion in the comments below. Another problem is that due to this difficulty in finding data, these numbers may vary from study to study. In any case, there are some records available, and we will present the data from the study of economists along with other updated to the present day. Now that we know what a moratorium or default is, a little bit about the history of these events, we can begin to answer our question: which is the most deadbeat country in history? We could imagine that perhaps it is Greece, as the fact of being an ancient country and being the first country to have recorded a moratorium may have contributed to being number one on the list. For you to have an idea, the first record of a moratorium dates from Greece in the year 377 before Christ. The default occurred because several polis, or as the Greek cities were called, decided not to honor their debts. In addition, Greece is also famous for another default episode. In 2015, when the country practically financially broke and its debt exploded, Greece became the first developed country in history to default on the International Monetary Fund, the IMF. As until then, none of the developed economies had failed to pay a loan granted by the IMF. This made it join the list of extremely troubled countries like Sudan and Somalia. But I think you've already realized that Greece is not the champion of defaults. So maybe it's Argentina, or maybe Venezuela. Both countries are very famous when it comes to the subject of defaults. Argentina, for example, in the aforementioned study, had 7 episodes of defaults up to the year 2006, with slightly different and updated data up to 2019. Bloomberg counted 9 cases. Including the 2020 case, Argentina reached the number of 10 defaults. However, she is not our champion. Venezuela is also not our number one, despite having almost reached the podium. counting with 10 default cases until the year 2006 according to the Economist's study, and 12 in total if we consider the 2 episodes of 2017 as reported by the Financial Times and 2019 as reported by Bloomberg. It is not the most deadbeat country in history, but it is worth warning that the country is on the way to become it. So, and after all, which country is number 1 on the list? Before we reveal, don't forget to subscribe to this new channel, give a like to the video, and activate the bell to receive more content like this. Well, according to the analyzed study, the country with the most defaults in history was Spain. That's right, one of the richest countries in the world historically, and also today has a problematic past when it comes to honoring commitments and debts. Just to get an idea of the Spain's wealth, according to data from the World Bank, Spain had gross domestic product, or GDP, in 2020 of around $1,280 billion. And according to the International Monetary Fund data for 2021, it will reach the value of $1,460 billion, ranking 14th amongst the richest countries. Furthermore, when we look at the country's per capita income, Spain is currently in the 29th position, around $31,000 a year. Returning to the study, according to the survey, Spain had, more conservatively, a total of 14 default episodes in its history. In fact, the study has 2 numbers. The first is a total of 13 cases, if we consider the count from the year of independence, 1476 to 2006. However, the detailing of the study also presents a count with 14 episodes throughout the history of Spain. If we consider the 6 cases from the period 1300 to 1799 and the 8 cases from 1800 to 1899. Considering 13 or 14 cases, the fact is that it is a surprise seeing Spain holding this position. Logically, we must consider the fact that Spain is an ancient country and therefore has a greater probability of having problems throughout history and thus having to default. And its defaults were caused by several reasons, as for example, the wars and crusades of the past, natural disasters, and economic crises. Even all the gold and silver brought from the New World at the time of the navigation were not enough to prevent the country's debts and defaults. Although, as shown in the study, Spain's defaults were concentrated in the past. Between the 16th and 19th centuries, Spain has recently faced serious difficulties following the 2008 subprime crises in the US. Between 2008 and 2014, affected by the subprime crisis, Europe faced the European sovereign debt crisis, when several countries experienced the collapse of financial institutions, high public debt, and widespread unemployment. The crisis, especially in Spain, became known as the Great Recession in Spain or the Great Spanish Depression. In 2012 and 2013, unemployment reached around 25% in Spain, and the country was unable to rescue its financial sector and had to ask for help through a €100 billion package provided by the European Stability Mechanism, ESM. Moreover, as a matter of fact, Spain was the first country to use this instrument. Furthermore, at the time, the country joined Portugal, Italy, Ireland, and Greece in the offensive acronym in English, PIIGS, or PIGS, in reference to the weaker economies of the Eurozone. But even with all this difficulty of the period, the country managed to get out of this crisis without having to default again. Anyway, from this quick passage in Spain's history of defaults and financial difficulties, we can see that no country, whether rich or poor, is free from going through new crises and even defaulting. Well, now that you know the most deadbeat countries in history, help this channel by saying what other countries or economic subject would you like us to analyze. Leave your answer in the comments below, and don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to our channel for new videos, where we'll cover, analyze, and reveal economic aspects of countries' successes and failures, and other interesting economic facts around the world.